So process is a great word because it's ultimately it's process, not prediction, that gets the price.
That's 100%.
And so it's really assessing a strategy and how well you think an agent can execute on that strategy and whether they will be able to get the most out of the market. Welcome to The Lowdown. We're here for episode 2 of season 2. I'm here with my good friend Adam Coburn, and today we're going to talk about the new rateable values that are about to come out for your house and what impact, if any, they will have on your house value. So Adam, interesting topic here. What's the short answer, just to save these people some time, they can stop the top podcast? What's the answer?
Yeah, well, so what the question is, do rateable values impact the true value of your home? The answer is no.
That's right. We can stop the podcast now.
Yeah.
Done.
Shut. Clip.
But
that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Yeah.
But I think people will be interested in why. And the short-term impact is no, because market value is not determined by an algorithm or a rateable value or anything, right?
I mean, I always tell people the rateable value, its only use is to determine rates. That's where its usefulness starts and ends. But the truth is, buyers and sellers, the whole market does seem to have a fascination
with the rateable
value.
the RV,
right?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? And so a lot of people are sort of thinking, what impact is it going to have? And I think people are going to be in a bit of a shock to know that there's probably going to be a 25, maybe even greater drop in the rateable values.
I reckon rateable values on average are going to come down 24%.
There you go. So so that when people see that, it has a psychological impact on them, doesn't it? So I do have this sort of thing that it won't make any difference to value, because value is determined by the market. Mm-hmm. And obviously, put your house on the market, it's the amount that the buyers are prepared to pay for it, obviously with the influence of a process and what a buyer owner will accept. So there's the two sides of the transaction. Mm-hmm. That's what determines market value, not an algorithm, right? But one thing we've been up against in terms of this low turnover environment over the last few years has been seller expectations. So there are a lot of houses that don't sell because seller expectations are too high. And so there is a chance that this is positive for the market in the sense that when you see your rateable value go down, because we're all anchored, aren't we? Which is human nature. Mm-hmm. And even, salespeople, everyone does it, right? It's just impossible to get away from it because it's a human bias. But we are anchored to our prior perceptions of value.
Yes.
And of course, when you're staring at a valuation, a rateable value, that has some psychological impact on that anchoring.
Yep.
And so I think, if anything, it's a net positive in that there's, for some sellers, when they get this 24% drop, it may make them a little more.
It'll help the sellers in the marketplace get their heads to reality quicker,
and avoid loss aversion.
Yes.
Because psychologists have shown that we weigh losses and potential losses much greater than we weigh gains and potential gains.
Yes.
So psychologically, when you see a rateable value of $1 million and then you realise you're only going to get $750, there's a feeling of loss.
Yep.
Which then it makes it harder to accept that. Mm-hmm. Whereas if suddenly your rateable value is $750 and then you've let that sink in and then your offer is $750, well, it could be that we're avoiding that kind of feeling of loss, that loss aversion, or that.
So it might help lubricate the market in that respect.
And it's only going to be subtle. I think this is going to be a subtle change, but I think it might actually help in that respect.
Yeah. And one thing I find is that when the new rateable values come out, there is a period of time where there's a bit of uncertainty in the market and a bit of confusion between the buyers and sellers. So what does that mean now for values? And as we've just discussed, it means nothing for values. But people still do pay a lot of attention to the rateable value, and they build up a model in their own head about the relationship on average between rateable value and market value, and they start applying rules like, well, I'm not going to pay more than X% above or below rateable value. And so it takes a while for them to establish these new norms, and therefore I find sometimes there's a period of 4 to 6 weeks or something like that where there's a bit of confusion. You hit a speed bump sort of thing,
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I remember that 3 years ago when they all changed. There was that.
It's just a function of a bit of confusion, right?
Yeah. But the reality is that, as we know, it's all the other property. Like, it's a relative game. Like, it's an interesting thing that sellers and agents, I think, sometimes aren't, thinking about, because when you're selling a house, you're kind of in a vacuum. where the only thing you get to think about is your house.
Yes, your own property.
But the reality is, when a buyer is out there looking, they're just going from one property to the next property to the next, and they're just comparing them.
It's natural just to compare one against the other against the other.
Exactly. And so their perception of value of your property is actually related to everything else on the market.
Of course.
And not, just, sort of a rateable value or a homes.co,
100%. 100%.
Anything.
And that is ultimately how a property should be valued, isn't it? But before we move on to that, given we're talking about rateable values, what about the impact on rates?
Yeah, great point, because there's confusion in the market around this, isn't there?
Yes, there is. I think so.
I hear people say, my rateable value's gone up. This is back 3 years ago when they all skyrocketed, and everyone says, oh no, I'm going to be paying significantly more rates.
Means my rate's going to go up.
And of course, we know that's not true. The rates, my understanding of it is the total pool of rates of rates is split between properties based on the rateable value, but it's actually the difference it's the relativity between the difference that they base how much you pay on. So it's actually, so if your rating value goes up relative to everything else, which would typically only happen if you made improvements to your property.
Yes, when it increases as a proportion compared to other properties.
To everything else, relative, right? To your neighbours, for example.
Then you are going to attract
a
slightly larger share of the entire rates bill, which is determined by the council's budget.
Yep.
So the council's budget goes up and RVs stay the same.
Yep. Then your
rates will go up.
Yep.
If the council's budget stays the same and everyone's rateable value increases by 10%, everyone's rates will remain the same.
Yep. And then if your one went up more than everyone else because you put a poll in your house and you put a whole lot of consent through the council, then your one goes up higher than everyone else, then you're going to pay slightly more rates.
Yes, correct.
That's the time when you pay more rates.
Yeah, correct.
So it's fascinating how people get that wrong, isn't it?
Yeah. So the fact that let's say that we're right and rates will come down by about 25%, that does not mean your rates bill is going down. Sorry.
No. And unfortunately, they're going to be going up because we've got pipes to fix and problems. And
and the budget that keeps
so
expanding.
Unfortunately, we can still expect to pay more rates regardless of our rate of values going down.
So thanks for that little segue. Back to valuations. So there's other types of valuations, right? All apparently acting as a proxy for value or trying to estimate actual market value. So what about registered market valuations done by registered valuers? What do you think about those?
It's a really interesting point. I think the way I would think about that is you can get 5 valuers come value your house. Every single one of them, looking at the same data, come up with a different range of value for your house. So when you think about that, what good is that? And of course, if you sell your house, it will be different to all of those ranges. So unless by pure chance, really. So I think the reality is that a valuer doesn't have a crystal ball. They can't know what the future holds. And so all a valuer is going to do is look at a bunch of data, and that data is going to be historical. And I think it is a good thing now. I hadn't really thought about this before, but it's a good thing now that you can probably get way more up-to-date data than you used to be able to get.
Yep.
And
you can see the photos. The marketing photos of those properties as well, so you get
that's right.
way easier to actually determine the comparative quality of the property.
Yes. But even
you're relating it to the
even that
property.
assessment is very subjective, right? What one valuer likes the look of will be different than what another valuer likes.
It's an emotional thing, buying a house, isn't it? So the same size property in a very similar location, similar era, similar character, similar land size, similar parking, and all that sort of thing could still sell for quite a different number.
And all that's telling you is what someone has paid for it in the past, which is good evidence. Like, it's great to say, well, someone's paid that in the past, it's likely someone will pay that in the future, but that's all it tells you. It doesn't tell you anything.
And the more similar the property is, and the more recent the property is, and the more similar the location and other such variables are,
the more confidence.
The more confident, the less likely it is to stray significantly from that number.
Yeah. That's a good point. I think when you have apartment buildings or rows of townhouses,
totally. Much more homogenous products.
Exactly, yeah. And so there's less variability, less subjectivity, and so you can probably get that range a bit tighter.
Well, less variables.
Less variables, exactly.
But
we know Wellington housing stock, which is one of the things I love about Wellington, is you've got everything from 1870s, villas through to modern, brand new houses and everything in between, 1950s houses.
And not just the actual dwellings themselves, but the geography.
Topography, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, your access, your sun profile, your usability of the site, your parking, the views, all these things make a significant difference. Yep.
So, if valuers' estimates aren't accurate, then you've got homes.co.nz and One Roof and all of these online estimates now using algorithms.
Yeah.
What's your take on those? What do you think about those and how they work?
I mean, I think they're useful. I think they have they sort of do a job in the market. But again, you can't fall into the trap of thinking if homes, for example, let's just take that one, if that on average is 100% correct, therefore that's what my house is worth. No, that's on average it's 100% correct. But how many houses are average? None. They're either above or below. Just a question of by how much. So again, that forms a benchmark, and then it'll be above or below depending on a distribution.
Adam, if you put one hand into a bucket of ice cold water and the other hand into a raging fire, do you feel warm on average?
Yeah. No,
that's right.
But I'm often hot and cold. But so I think they're quite good. And of course, if the market is rising, something like the Homes algorithm will give a value that on average is a bit low because it's based on historical information. If the market is falling, it'll give an average that is a bit high. But again, I come back to the other point, which is that's on average, and no home or very few homes are actually technically average.
I mean, the way I think about it is that there is no algorithm for what the market will pay. It's humans that are involved, and the thing is that I think that's a useful tool as well because it's going to give you some. The irony of it is it's useful because it's subjective, but that's also why it's inaccurate. So they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, true.
It's like they don't have the human brain to come and see the subjectivity, whereas you and I know that the feng shui, so to speak, or the way a property feels, which is only something you experience when you get there.
Yep.
Will make a difference to how many people like it.
The way it flows,
the way the sun is and the light coming through, and how
Yep.
you experience that when you get there. And you could have another property that has all the same statistics, which is the objective way that these algorithms are working, that people don't like. And therefore, it'll only sell when it gets to a price where people are prepared to trade off those things because the price is lower.
Which is exactly why, kind of by definition, on average, they're about right.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But on a case-by-case basis,
they're all over the shop.
They'll be 100% wrong.
Yeah.
Or wrong 100% of the time. Just wrong by how much?
Just to clarify what you're talking about there, I think a good, and that comment I made about the bucket of cold water and the fire is if you have one property that sells for $1 million and one that sells for 500. The average is 750.
Yeah.
But neither of those properties could be valued based on its average.
That's right.
That's probably the simplest way to put it, isn't it?
Yep.
And so averages really only tell you trends. They're good for looking at trends. They're not looking.
100% correct. 100% correct. So if you look at the estimate values that on Homes, the website, and you see how they're moving, that will be influenced by the entire portfolio of sales in the region, and so that's kind of interesting information. But it is not going to be an accurate estimate of your home's market value.
So going back to the subjectivity of this stuff, what then about real estate agents' appraisals? Because we're out there, people ask us to come and give them an appraisal. Now, there's a reason why they still are. Now, we haven't had any reduction in appraisals since Homes.co came out, which is an interesting thing, right? People aren't going onto Homes and going, okay, I now have that estimate. They're still contacting just as many times as they did before us, even if they're 2 years away and they're just interested in the value.
Yep.
So implicitly the market is efficient in understanding that subjectivity.
Yeah.
But
be fair to say though that those potential sellers or those people who are making those inquiries are coming to the table better informed.
Yeah, well, maybe they have an idea that's been influenced
and so,
more than they did in the past.
Yeah, so they come to the table maybe
with more of a view.
That's right, and they want verification.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I agree.
As opposed to being educated from zero. Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
So now we've determined or we've agreed that valuations don't give you a hell of a lot of useful information.
I mean, it's not to say they're not useful. Valuations have a purpose. but in terms of determining the actual market value of your home,
it can be quite different, right? And so what's your opinion on appraisals? How do you think about that?
About appraisals, and I mean, how accurate are an agent's appraisal? I've not done any research on this, but by our nature, real estate agents have to be optimistic people. If an agent is not optimistic, they will become extinct.
So yeah,
right?
Yes, that's true.
So I think there can be a natural tendency for agents to be optimistic, and they like their potential vendor, they like the property, they like the idea of getting the business, and so I think it's natural in our character to be optimistic, and then perhaps, if anything, err on the optimistic side. What do you think?
Especially when people are people pleasers, you get people pleasers that don't want to, and of course, with the 26% odd reduction in value, you feel a bit like a doctor giving people bad news sometimes, don't you? When you come in and it's difficult. And I mean, obviously, the very best salespeople will be able to give people the bad news, but they will be very good at explaining and being able to show how the market determines the value, and how they will be able to go out and find the true market value, and explaining that the appraisal, ultimately is not the way to determine that. It's actually going to the market that's the way to determine.
I mean, when I do an appraisal, I tell my potential clients, I mean, this appraisal here, how much impact does this have on the actual result? None. So in that respect, throw it away. But I can lay out the evidence and say, here's the logic.
So from that perspective, I think they are just probably around about the same as the valuers, apart from there is that bias. So you have to be careful. A certain, the agent, not, as you point out, it's not intentional. The reality is it's human nature, isn't it, to be perhaps a bit more optimistic. So perhaps appraisals may be on it, and just as a guess, maybe they're slightly more optimistic than valuers' assessments. I don't know. But,
well, I think that depends on the valuer's instructions. I mean, I've seen some valuations done by vendors, or not vendors, but owners, and the reason for the valuation is to get more finance. Now, a valuer typically is not in the business of crashing a deal or preventing their clients from proceeding with plans that they have.
I understand the point. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, if you saw a valuation done by a buyer and a valuation done by a seller, invariably they will be biased towards the client, right?
Yep.
And that's one of the reasons why in law, often when you're mediating something to do with like commercial leases and stuff, both parties can get a valuation and then you mediate in the middle because of that. And I think that's the smartest way to do that. But that shows that bias is there.
Yes.
And that the law is
the most extreme situations I've seen, though, or the most extreme examples I've seen, is when an owner is getting a valuation in order to secure more funding or in order to renew funding or something like that. And I've seen valuations that, and it shouldn't be this way, I'm sure, but nonetheless, I've seen valuations that are so far out from reality
that it seems really bizarre. Yeah.
I mean, it honestly, you sort of think, how can this? This is a joke,
Yeah.
But
No, it's fascinating, and so I think if you were getting 3 agents to assess a property, and you were looking at what they were saying about the value, the way I would think about it is I'd be looking for someone's objectivity and how they were thinking through that problem, like how they were, what they had assessed the data on, because the reality is all we can do is look in that rear vision mirror, take the sort of assessment of different sales that were as similar as possible, and what the agent should be looking for is similarities in terms of size, position, location, and then that kind of subjective assessment of feel, flow, indoor, outdoor, the demographic that would have bought it, and then look at that. And so the only thing you can do as a salesperson or as a valuer for that matter is really just look at the features and how they compare, and remove rateable values, remove homes. Don't look at homes.co. Just say, based on those features, this one is either similar or slightly better or slightly worse, and therefore I'm gonna use this to put my range in this point.
100%.
And by law, we have to have at least 3 comparisons, unless there are none, in which case we have to disclose that. And then you use those comparisons to make a basic assessment. But of course, when we go to market, things are going to turn out quite differently, and quite often we're going to beat those ranges. It happens all the time, right? So if it's that variable in terms of what we might get, what should a seller focus on when they're getting 3 appraisals, and if value is not tangible?
Yeah, So given the actual number that's on the paper makes no difference to the outcome, is what you're saying,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So therefore, how does a vendor choose someone to work with in terms of selling a house? Well, I think it's comes down to two main things. Is this person experienced and competent? Do they have the required skills? And secondly, do I trust them? And it all comes down to the detail of what's behind the process that they're going to engage, and can they be bothered actually to go through all those steps? Because look, let's face it, it's not rocket science, it's not brain surgery, is it? And so
simple but not easy.
Yeah, that's right. It's always going to be easier to take the shortcuts than not take them.
That's good for you and I, isn't it?
Right.
It's not too complicated.
That's right. And so I think it just comes down to those things. Subjectively, you have to be able to get along with this person because you're going to be working very closely with them. Do you trust that they're going to engage a really good quality process to drive the best possible outcome at the end of the day?
So process is a great word because it's ultimately it's process, not prediction, that gets the price.
That's 100%.
And so it's really assessing a strategy and how well you think an agent can execute on that strategy and whether they will be able to get the most out of the market. And just for if viewers are wondering why, if an agent has an appraisal that's lower, they can still get a higher price. How does that work? That is that might be confusing. You might say, well, hang on, if they think it's lower, wouldn't they just be targeting that or putting that out? And of course, the reality is that the market is determined through competition amongst buyers. And so good salesperson strategy will be a way of generating competition, getting the most amount of people that are out there that want to buy the house, putting them into a process that allows them to have the chance to buy the house of their dreams in competition with other buyers, and in which case then they have to put their best foot forward. And if you have a process like that, you're determining the true market value for that home in a fair and in a way that everybody has a level playing field, but we are finding out where the maximum is, and that can be quite different than what that assessment of value is.
Yeah, I mean, you could be after as high a price as you want and be trying to get as high a price as you want, but if you communicate that in the wrong way to the marketplace and you get no one through the property, good luck.
So just to wrap this up, how do you think people should think about the value? If you're just living in your home today and you've got a mortgage on it and you're not thinking about selling, or maybe you are in a couple of years, how do you think people should just in general should think about the value of their home? Do you think they should think about it? Do you think they should worry about it? Do you think they should have a firm view on what value is, or how do you think they should think about it?
Well, I don't think the value of your home has any bearing on your life at all until you come to sell it and buy another one.
Yeah. And
until that point, it's not relevant. The only thing I would say is perhaps if you're looking to make significant capital investments into your property, then you perhaps should consider, am I going to get my investment back if that's important to you?
The answer is almost always no, isn't it? And this with cost of doing work to properties.
You're not going to get it back.
Well, you get emotional value from the use of it, but unless you factor that, there's almost never any capital gain, from doing renovations to a house these days. Anyway, different topic, but
so I could just see us slipping down another rabbit hole there.
So I agree, Adam. The reason I bring that up as a way to wrap this up is I just find that people are often quite obsessed with the value of their house, and they get quite caught up in what it is and they're thinking about it because, of course, often it's related to people's entire net worth.
It's the biggest asset.
Yeah, and so they feel like they have to measure this number. But I'm totally agree with you. It really is irrelevant. It's the time to sell. It's going to have a value. The only true way to determine that is going to be to actually go to market. Doesn't matter how many valuers you get in, how many real estate agents you get in, how many appraisers you get, or how many websites you look at. You are not going to know the value of that home till you try and sell it.
Yeah.
So the key at that point is just to find the best person to do it for you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. 100%. That's it. Nice chat, Adam.
Good one. Thanks.
That was the lowdown. Thanks for tuning in. Please like and subscribe, and we're going to do it again.
See you next time.